Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me here today to talk about how to best build your AWS backup environment with Veeam. I'm Dexter, your host today. I'm the SE manager for Southeast Asia and Korea. Right. So today's topic will be a bit deep dive. All right. So we'll talk about how Veeam can protect your hyperscaler cloud workloads. And I'm going to show you throughout this session, I'm going to show you some of the demo videos as well to help you guide you through the deployment to the configuration to backup and recovery, as well as talking about multi-cloud uh, data protection as well. Right, so let's not delay any further. Let's go into it. Before we begin the session today, let's quickly take a look. Why are we still talking about backup for the cloud workloads, right? So there are data loss still happens in the cloud, right? And this is some survey that we have done previously. And you notice that out of 100%, right, just take a percentage count, today, only 20% doesn't have any data loss experience. If you look at the chart on the right side, one of the highest data loss scenario is user error or accidental deletion that definitely happens on a daily basis. Of course, the other threat will be the security concern, right? Especially recent times with the cybersecurity ransomware attack that is getting up as well in the chart, right? So if you look at the cloud or the infrastructure as a service environment, why do you still need a backup? If you understand how the hyperscaler runs in this particular case, since we are talking about AWS, let's take AWS as the hyperscaler of today's topic, right? The responsibility for AWS, in this case, in terms of security for the cloud, is very much focused on the infrastructure as a service. As a consumer yourself, as a customer, you are responsible for your data, as well as one of the other thing, it will be the access credentials, who or whom can access your data. That whole truly relies on you as a consumer, right? So let's go a bit deeper and talk about what Veeam got to offer to you from the hyperscalers point of view, right? Veeam does offer Veeam backup for the public cloud, namely AWS, Azure, and GCP. Today's topic, we will focus and also demonstrate on AWS platform, right? So if you look at a chart, what Veeam Cloud Native Protection with Veeam offers is the capability to provide data protection for your workload through three scenarios. One is using the native snapshots within AWS, snapshot your EC2 to an EBS, right? Allowing you to replicate to a same region or a different region of your choice. And then, of course, the second stage is the capability to perform a backup, right? A snapshot is not sufficient to protect your workload within, right? It's not just a snapshot, but it depends on your source. Of course, it gives you faster backup and recovery. Having object storage provide you another copy of your workloads in a backup format in object storage. And then on the third stage, where you can explore, is to integrate with our Veeam backup and replication product to provide you the capability for file level instant VM recovery to on-prem, or likewise restore it to another hyperscaler beyond AWS. Right, so let's look at it. What does it entails in Veeam backup for AWS? So it's cloud native, definitely. AWS native. When we talk about AWS native, is basically agentless backup and DR with native snapshots for the lowest RPOs. Next is policy based. So policy based to help you automate your snapshots, your backup, and your data lifecycle management of your backup data sets. Right. Of course, the other thing is the capability to protect your VPC, right? Back up your Amazon VPC so that you can restore all your Amazon VPC settings to another region of your choice. Next is making sure that you have application consistent backup or your EC2 or your RDS, right, with zero data loss backup and recovery. Or that, of course, the last bottom three is the capability of recovery, right? Able to perform full restore of your workloads, of your EC2 instance, stuff like that, or able to perform file level recovery, or the capability to perform instant recovery of your Amazon EC2 as a VMs on-prem, right? Right. So native by design, what do we mean, right? We have the capability to perform snapshots that gives you the options of lowest RPO by doing snapshotting of your EC2 instances, right? Lowest RTO for quick recovery, right? And all this through automation by scheduling, right? Without having to do any coding, stuff like that. Of course, to manage the cost, all right, we back up to object storage such as Amazon S3, right? For anything that is longer terms, where you need to meet those retention policy, you can leverage on S3 Glacier or S3 Glacier Deep Archive to manage your costs, right? Keeping everything in EBS will be more costly. If you are doing snapshot, that's about 5 cents, and going to S3 or S3 Glacier Deep Archive will cost you a fraction of a cent. Right. Of course, the next thing is security, the capability to do cross-account backup or restore, as well as leveraging AWS key management system with multi-factor authentication in place, right? Making sure that your data is protected against whether it's insiders or a malicious actor. So let's take a quick look in the diagram here before we jump into the first demo. If you look at the diagram here, you notice that that is a very typical deployment. You have your VPC, you have your production account where you deploy your workloads, whether it's EC2 instances, RDS, or EFS, or even your Amazon VPC, right? So typically, what you can do, you can deploy the Veeam backup for AWS through AWS Marketplace, right? And of course, for simplicity, you can deploy the Veeam backup for AWS appliance directly into your production account, right? But please do not do this, right? That's what the topic about, right? What we will recommend you is to do a best practice to create a different backup account all right, and deploy your Veeam backup for AWS appliance there, right? Giving you a logical segregation from your production account, right? So let's quickly jump into a video, right? And I just want to quickly share with you here, right? And I'll do a quick overview. This is a typical deployment AWS Marketplace where you can deploy Veeam backup for AWS here, right? So this is run by, you can basically look at, we offer 3 types, Veeam backup for AWS, free edition, where you can protect up to 10 instances, or you can use the Veeam backup for AWS paid edition, right? And of course, we have to bring your own license. So for this demo, we definitely going to use AWS free edition. So looking at this is a brief description. Continue to subscribe. It will give you a ULA of the license point of view, and you continue to the configuration page. And over here, what you're going to do is how you want to do this deployment. You can choose to deploy to existing VPC or to a new VPC of your, right? So you can create a new VPC while you're deploying a Veeam backup for AWS. And here, what you're going to do is deploy as a new VPC, and then you choose your version and your region that you want to deploy this Veeam backup for AWS appliance. All right, once that is done, you can continue to launch the deployment page, right? So when you launch this, what you're going to do is you're going to launch through CloudFormation and move on to the next page, and there will be a couple of questions that they'll be asking you during this stage, right? This is by default launching to S3, and then you choose provide a stack name of your choice, define your instance size, put in your key pair for the Veeam backup for AWS server, right? And then you can put in your network configuration, whether you want to use elastic IP or true or false, right? Or you also can specify what are the allowed source IP address to connect to this appliance, right? And the rest you can continue, and then you can choose in the event that there's a failure in this deployment, do you choose to roll back or do you want to preserve whatever is being deployed successfully? And going through that deployment page, of course, then you can check your knowledge that the AWS cloud formation required IAM role resources is required before you deploy the stack, right? So once you deploy the stack, you go to the events page where you get the deployment process and updating you what the whole deployment process is going through, right? So I'm not going to go until the end. So I'm going to stop here for now and then move back to the demo. So this is very quickly, easily done, right, through our marketplace. Right, so the deployment is straightforward. Go to marketplace, perform a deployment, right? Put in the necessary information that you have through cloud formation, network, stuff like that. Let's move on. Once you have done your Veeam backup for AWS deployment, your appliance, right? The next thing that you want to do is to set up the configuration. So you have deployed a VBA in the backup account, right? That's where you will need to define the worker nodes. The worker nodes basically, and then you need to define the repository that you host or holding your backup data, right? You can define your backup repository with Amazon S3, Amazon S3 Glacier, and Deep Archive. Of course, the next thing that you want to specify is the IAM roles, right? So being as a backup account, you also assuming that the backup account do not have the right credential or permission to access the various production accounts workload, right? And this is whereby you can define the permission boundary to access the various workload in whether it is EC2 instances, Amazon RDS, EFS, or even the VPC, right? Making sure that you give the least, the minimum permission to perform the necessary backup and recovery roles for all these different workloads, right? And also on the backup account, you also want to make sure that the service role and the repository role are segregated to ensure that minimal exposure to your environment. So with that, let's go and take a quick look of the configuration. So once you have deployed your Veeam backup for AWS appliance, this is the first page when you first log in, right? And you'll see a dashboard. Of course, this is not a new one. This is something that we have deployed, and you can see all the various status like alarms, total EC2 and RDS instances protected, right? And what are the policies running and repository. To start the configuration, first you need to click on the configuration on the top right corner. And if you notice, it's a guided process where we'll tell you you need to add in AWS IAM roles, configure the worker nodes, as well as add in the repository to hold your backup data sets. So let's quickly jump into the IAM role. By default, during the deployment, we will deploy a default backup restore IAM role. And of course, you can create additional IAM role over here, where this case, this is shown here, and you can create an IAM role using your current account, right? And then choose your current AWS role name, or you can choose to define another existing account in your IAM role as well. Of course, you need to put in your external ID, and you create a brand new IAM role as well, right? In your IAM role, you can give it a name, you can grant the various permission in terms of service, policy, or repository roles. Once done that, you need to put in your access and secret key to provide you that credential to apply this IAM role. Right. Of course, we are not going to show you how to do the access key and secret key. If not, it will expose our keys to you. Okay. So once that is done, right, we're going to skip that. We can go get the various roles. So if you look at the default backup roles, the AWS role name is shown here. And then, of course, you can define here a different IAM role. And if you go back and look at the settings of existing IAM roles here, you can see the account ID, the role name, as well as the external ID. Right. The next thing will be going to, of course, you can also verify your permissions or your IAM roles, whereby you can do a check, right, on the IAM roles. If there is any permissions not available, you can click on the grant, right? The grant will ask you for the access and secret key to apply the IAM roles necessary for it. All right, next we look at the workers. The workers is the one that copy or backup and restore your data to the S3 object storage. Right, in this case, there is three objects, so-called three worker nodes deployed in 3 different regions, as you can see here. Right, so each worker nodes will manage in each region. Right, you can add on additional worker node if you want to. All right, if you go into the worker node, you can look at the various regions there are and which availability zone, which VPC is resides, and subnet, as well as the security groups. Right, all these are all available in your AWS VPC setup in the beginning. Right, once that is done, you will need to move on to the repository. Right, so in the repository, you can see that we have defined a couple of repositories. Right, some of them are S3, some of them are Glacier, and some of them are Glacier Deep Archive. Right, you can define the various repository in AWS to hold your backup data. Right, depending on the retention requirements that you will need. Right, for long term, definitely we advise you to put into Glacier Deep Archive for lower costs. Okay, of course, you can add on additional repository. This is to illustrate how easily can be done. You can define your IAM role for your repository, right? And then check the permission, right? Every page you can do a check permission to make sure that you have the necessary credential permission to access the repository. Of course, you choose a bucket and then you can create a new folder in that new repository and define your storage class over here, right? That once done, you click create, right? The next thing is the encryption of your repository. You can enable or disable it. If you enable it, you have 2 options of encryption. Right, this is data at rest encryption. Right, you can use a passphrase password to protect your repository, or you can use KMS encryption key. Right, so of course you need to go to your KMS website in AWS to create your KMS encryption. Right. So once done, you are ready to go with the accounts, the repository, and workers nodes set up in your environment. You are ready to create your first backup policy. With that, I'm going to stop here, right, and jump back to the slides. Right, so configuration, remember, go to configuration when you first launch your Veeam backup for AWS appliance. Right, go to the top right corner whereby you have a configuration, and then you configure the IAM roles for the permissions to perform backup for your workloads. Next is to configure your workers as well as your repository to host your backup data sets. So once that is done, you are ready to perform your backup, right? So the worker node, what they do is that from this diagram, Veeam backup for AWS will perform a snapshot of your instances, a snapshot for your RDS or EFS or Amazon VPC for backup, right? You leveraging the worker node, what it do is that it will copy the snapshots from the EC2 instance, right, to your Amazon S3 repository to hold a backup of your S3, right? So let's quickly go into the backup and recovery demo here. So same thing, going to the same page, you'll notice the interface of the dashboard whereby you can see all the backup status here, and you can go into management policy to create your backup job. If you look at the top, these are the various backup policies that you can create: EC2s, instances, RDS, VPC, as well as EFS. Right. For this case, we will go through creating a backup policy for the EC2 instance. Right. So let's add in a new backup policy called demo. Right. Click next, and then you choose the backup IAM role to perform this backup. Right. In this case, we choose protection to protect EC2 workload. And then before we proceed, making sure that IAM role have the necessary permission, you can do a check, right? And then from here, you can see all the checks passes, and then you choose which region. You can choose the region that you want to protect, right? You can choose one, or you can choose multiple regions of your choice, right? Of course, that is not restricted to one only. Once you are done with the region that you choose, you can next choose what are the resources to protect, right? So in this region, you may have more than one EC2 instance or other workloads that you want to protect, right? If you want to do a simplified protection, you can choose all resources, right? And that's what will happen is they'll protect all the EC2 instances within that region, or you can define a specific instance or EC2 to protect, right? And or alternatively, you can use tag to choose the workload to protect. This is more dynamic and more elastic, especially in the cloud space, whereby deployment of a workload can be dynamic and right. So you want to make sure that any new workload being deployed has the capability to be added into your backup job automatically. So in this case, what we have done here is we choose a tag that have Veeam on demo, as well as another tag going to add on here, right, called AWS backup, right, and with a value true. Right, so these are the two tags that are going to add on to this backup policy. With this added tag, any EC2 instances with this tag will be automatically added to this backup job policy. Right. You also can define what are the volumes to be excluded if that is a multiple multiple volume within that EC2 instances. All right. So next is about guest processing. You want to make sure that you are able to protect application aware workloads. Right. So you can use SSM to protect, leveraging VSS to protect workloads such as SQL, Exchange, stuff like that. Or you can use pre and post script for Linux instances as well as Windows instances. Right, over here, you can choose where you want to target your backup to. Right, so where do you want to store? So we do support replication. So we can choose to replicate your snapshots to another location, right, to another using a different account with a different region. Right, you also can enable your encryption if you choose to, right? And next will be the backup, right? Snapshot replication of snapshot is not a full 100% considered a backup, so we always advise our customer to create a backup copy of the snapshots. Over here, you can start to define your backup settings, right? By turning on, you can choose where do you want to store your backup data sets. In this case, you can choose to be within the same region so that you do not incur additional egress costs, right? Or you can choose another different region if you choose. You want to make sure that you have high availability, right? And of course, you can choose to store your archive into a S3 Glacier Deep Archive to manage your backup costs as well. In this case, we will choose the Glacier or Deep Archive in this case. Right. So once you are done, the next step will be going to the schedule. This is a schedule where you can define your retention policy, right? You can choose to do snapshot, you can choose to do replica based on your setting previously, your under targets, where do you store your replicas, where do you store your backups, is right, is all defined in the previous step. And then of course you can define your daily retention, how many copies do you want to keep, how many copies do you want to for your snapshot, replicas as well as your backup. Of course, if you have a longer term retention policy, such as a yearly backup, all right, you can choose how many archives you want to store, right? Next is to copy the text, right? Early on, to make sure that your backups are dynamic, all right, we recommend you to use tagging. So definitely we do recommend you, if you're using tagging, to copy the text from the source volume. So in the event that you want to restore, you also can choose to restore this text, right? Once we go to the next step, this is the cost estimation page, whereby we will tell you roughly what is the cost for the various features that you have enabled, such as snapshots, replica, backups, archive, as well as the ad traffic, whether you are doing a within the same VPC traffic or you're going across different region, as well as the transaction of API costs, right? In this case, the total cost for this backup policy costs about 5.9, right? This is estimated because we have not really taken into account the change rate or the churn rate of the cost. Of course, next is to go to the general session, and before we complete the backup policy, you can run a test configuration. This test configuration will check through the various policies as well as permission to make sure that your backup policy runs successfully in when the schedule is has started. Right. So I'm not going to save here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into the recovery process, right? So once you created your backup job, your job here demo will have the status that have never been executed. That's normal because you have not scheduled to run yet. The next thing is to look at the protected data, right? The protected data, you have EC2 here, right? You can go into EC2 and then you look at RDS. We have some RDS protected workloads as well as EFS and VPC. Let's quickly jump into one of the workloads here, right? If you look at the recovery point, you can see the various recovery point of that backup, right? You also can look at another one. If you go in here, you can see the various backup snapshots, replicas, as well as the different type of the storage class being used to store those backups or archive, right? In this case, this is S3 Glacier, right? If you are storing your backup data in S3 Glacier Deep Archive, you will see this retrieve backup, right? You will need to retrieve S3 Deep Glacier Deep Archive before you can perform a restore. If you choose a S3 bucket restore point, you were given the choice to restore your data from S3, whether is it an instant restore, whereby you restore the whole EC2 instance back to your VPC, or a separate rename instances or a different region. Right, so you can choose whether to replace or do an out of place recovery of your EC2 instance. Right, you also have the capability to perform volume restore, right? That will also provide you the capability to just select a particular volume. For example, if you have a D drive in this EC2 instance of a Windows, right, you can choose to restore Windows, or you can choose to do a file level recovery, right? File level, you can restore the file back to the original EC2 instance, or you can choose to download the file and then copy that file to another location of your choice as well. Right, and the file recovery will just spin up a console, a separate interface whereby you can choose the file to restore easily. Right, so in VPC, you can choose to perform a backup of your VPC. Right, this is to show you in this VPC what are the components being backed up. You also can do a comparison of your current VPC attributes as well as the restore point that you've chosen. Do a comparison. In this case, there's not much changes except the last one here. you can do select this restore point and then choose to compare what are the attributes being changed here. So production is on the right side, whereby these are being changed. On the backup, there's nothing, right? All right, so you can determine what is being changed in your VPC. So in case that you have some misconfiguration, you can restore the previous backup VPC to your VPC, right? Or you can do a comparison side by side by removing the show only change attribute on the top right corner, right? Showing you what are the attributes being backed up at this restore point, right? So using this, you can perform a restore to override your existing VPC, or you can restore your VPC settings to another region or to another new VPC of your choice, right? For quick recovery, quick setup of your network settings, all the stuff. Right. In database, you can also perform restore based on the database instance, and this is all guided through to help you do your restore. You can restore your instance to a same region or to an alternate region in this case. Right, so that's it. Let us move to the last stage of the presentation. Right, this is something that we like to advocate. So what we have said so far in the beginning is about Veeam backup for AWS. As you know, Veeam backup for AWS is to protect workloads in AWS, whether you are running EC2, RDS, EFS, as well as your VPC, and you back up those data to a backup repository such as S3 or S3 Glacier Deep Archive. We also have the capability to integrate Veeam backup for AWS to our Veeam backup and replication. In this case, in the typical scenario, your Veeam backup and replication should be deployed in your data center or on-prem, right? So using that capability of integration, we give our customer or users the capability to perform data recovery, such as your EC2 instance, right, back to the data center as a virtual machine, such as VMware, VM, or Hyper-V VM, or even AHV VM. We also give our customers the capability to convert or restore them to other cloud players, such as Azure or GCP, right? So if that's by doing that integration, we unleash the capability to help you move your workload across multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. Right, so let's go into the demo here. So this is something, if you are using Veeam before Veeam backup and replication, this is an interface that you should be quite familiar, right? Looking at the Veeam backup and replication console over here, you will see that there is a few backup jobs that's available on the jobs console, whereby you can see not just AWS workloads, that is right, AWS EC2. You also can see various workloads from other cloud provider hyperscalers as well, right? And you can see all the such as EFS, RDS, VPC backups. You also can see Azure here, right? You also can see GCP over here. Okay. So if you look at here, how do we do this add-on of this workload? So basically what you can do, you can also deploy Veeam backup for AWS over here by going to backup infrastructure, add server. You can see these are the various workloads that Veeam can protect, right? So in this case, you can use add a Veeam backup for AWS. Early on, we have demonstrated the deployment of Veeam backup for AWS through Marketplace, right? So if you have done that, you can use this approach to connect to existing appliance. If you have not deployed a VBA, you can use to deploy a VBA as a new one. And then what happens is to guide the wizard will guide you through the deployment process, which is similar to what you have done earlier on in the Marketplace. Right, once you have done that, you will see this entry here where you have a AWS backup appliance deployed here. right? Now let's go to this backup jobs here and then take a quick look, right? So what happens here is that this job we have performed a backup copy job whereby the backup of your EC2 is stored in the S3 bucket in AWS. What we can also help our customer to perform is a 3-2-1 rule whereby you can also perform a backup copy job to backup your backup jobs in your S3 to uh, another location, such as on-prem repository in VBR, in the Veeam Backup and Replication repository, right? In this case, it's being moved to the SOBR01 here on-prem, or you can choose to, all right, choose a standard repository of your choice as well. Right, next you go and look at the snapshots, right? This is what is the backups. We have the visibility of what you have backup in the cloud. That means through VBA, Veeam Backup for AWS, and we are able to perform the restore through Veeam Backup and Replication Console, right? So basically, you do not need to go back to Veeam Backup for AWS to perform the restore. You can alternatively come to VBR and perform the restore, right, by connecting to the repository through external repository over here, right? So let's take a look over here, right? If you look at it, once we see we add on the VBA into the Backup and Replication Console, right, and register the repository to Veeam Backup and Replication Console, we are given a few options, right? You have the capability to perform instant recovery, right? In this case, if you perform an instant recovery, you can perform a recovery to restore it to a virtual machine, whether it's on VMware or Hyper-V or even AHV, right? So using instant recovery gave you the capability to move your backup workloads in EC2 to on-prem, right? If you click, you also have the capability to restore your EC2 instance, in this case, to a Microsoft Azure, right? So you do have the capability to do a cross hyperscaler restore to a various hyperscaler, right? In this case, we're going to launch a restore to Microsoft Azure. You see this, you can choose a restore point. You can choose the subscription in Azure as a wizard driven, right? You can choose different subscription and the location where you want to restore your EC2 instance into a Azure VM, right? All this can be done. Of course, the step will guide you through to choose what is the VM size, the resource group, and the network connectivity in Azure before the recovery of your instance here. All right. Hopefully with this, we give you an insight that not only doing data protection within AWS, doing cross-region protection or recovery, we also demonstrate here to how to perform a restore to on-prem or to across a different hyperscaler, right? With that, that's the end of the demo, right? If you have any questions, please do post a question in the question chat, the question portion in this GoToWebinar, right? Or Okay, I got a question here. What's the difference between N2WS and Veeam backup in terms of advantage? So one off my head, in terms of N2WS, what we understand is their stronghold is very much on assess. Their approach is more on the SaaS deployment, software as a service deployment. Um, what I understand, maybe my information may not be latest. What we understand is their focus is very much on AWS. I do hear that they have intention to move to Azure, but I'm not too sure about that. So they are very much on a SaaS model where they protect workloads in AWS, right? So from Veeam perspective, we are always a firm believer of hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, right? So if you put in if you look at Veeam backup for AWS as a standalone, yeah, that is Veeam does perform cloud native backup for AWS. But if you integrate it with Veeam backup and replication, right, we give our customers the capability to support hybrid cloud or multi-cloud with the options of moving their workloads in and out of the hyperscaler they are using, right? So that's, I think that is one of the main key reasons that advantage that we have over our N2WS. All the features are for the in-house IT specialists to use. What the features we have shown here, if you are asking whether um, in terms of licensing point of view, whether I hope I answer your question correctly. Um, the whether is it BYOL, sorry, I'll say paid edition or the free community edition. The community edition and the paid edition functions is the same from Veeam Backup for AWS, right? It's the same where you can get it from AWS Marketplace and deploy it there. All right. The only caveat is that the free edition, community edition, is limited to 10 instance, right? And of course, paid edition can go beyond that. If you proceed with the BYOL, of course, the multi-cloud or hybrid cloud options become available because of course, you will need to integrate it with Veeam backup and replication to achieve that. So, not sure if support the bare metal recovery if backup physical server. This is more for, I assume this is more from Veeam backup and replication question. We do support physical server. Of course, Veeam, in terms of physical server, we have Veeam agents, right? So Veeam agents will need to be deployed on the physical server in terms of Windows, Linux, right? And of course, you can perform bare metal recovery for those workloads. We also can give our customers, especially we are well known for that, the capability to perform restore of these physical workloads if they are supported in the cloud or they are supported on the hypervisor that we are able to restore to. So we do support conversions of bare metal workloads and do a direct restore to the hyperscaler like AWS and convert them to EC2 instances. Same goes for if you are restoring it to a hypervisor or converting them to virtual machines, you can restore them and convert them to VMware instances or Hyper-V VM virtual machine, guest OS, as well as AHV VMs. Aside from the snapshot, is there a Veeam client-based backup for database? Okay, so for Veeam backup for AWS per se, let's say you are looking at Veeam backup for AWS per se, there is no agents for database. Basically for AWS, we are using SSM, right? SSM will talk to VSS to perform backup. So in this case, since we are using leveraging VSS, that will be basically we are referring to the standard Microsoft application, right? You can do that backup, application aware backup, of course, if you are restoring back to if you are restoring to EC2, of course, EC2 recovery, you only given the option of image level backup, restore, volume level, or file level restore, right? But if for whatever reason you are restoring it back to on-prem, integrating with Veeam backup and replication, you can use Veeam Explorer to restore the databases or the application that Veeam support. Okay, hope I answer your questions. So for MySQL, all right, always on. I'm not too sure you are referring to EC2 instance, or you are talking about Veeam backup for on-prem environment, right? So for for AWS or in the cloud, definitely we will go with agentless approach, a cloud native backup, right? But if you are looking at always on, SQL always on, or MySQL always on, I think this is replication. So we will still do the image level with, if it's running on Linux EC2 instance, definitely you will need to run pre and post script for that to make sure that we can do a consistency backup of your EC2 instance, right? If you are running it on-prem, right, going beyond the AWS context, running on-prem, definitely you will need to run Veeam agent on all the servers. Can we use Veeam backup and replication license on Veeam backup for AWS? Yes, definitely you can. All right, that's referring to licensing, a bit of more on the licensing topic. So Veeam do offer Veeam Universal License. So if you purchase Veeam Universal License, you can use Veeam Universal License for workloads running in the cloud, namely AWS, GCP, as well as Azure, right? You also can use the same license to protect workloads, whether they are running on physical workloads, bare metal, operating system that we support running on bare metal, or virtual machines that running on the hyperscalers that we support. Yes, that is possible using the VUL license. All right. Hope I answered your question. So just to add that add on to that, all right, so most of the time we do encourage our customer to use Veeam Universal License to give you the capability, especially if you are running a hybrid cloud environment, right? So that will help you uh, elevate you away from that licensing pain that you need to go and count if my workload start to migrate to the cloud, right? Especially nowadays, we have a lot of customers moving on-prem workload to the cloud, yet they still need to protect those workloads. So Veeam Universal License will address that in the commercial sense. Is there any DB consistency issue if we do snapshot backups on databases? Yes, I will say that we leverage cloud native. So if we are doing Windows EC2 instances, and you are running some databases supported by, definitely you need to run the SSM agents within that EC2 instance, right, to perform a application consistent backup, right? So that is definitely required, right? If let's say that particular database is not supported, right, of course, then you would need to do the pre and post script in this sense. Yeah. All right. So I've gone through any questions, most of the questions in the Q&A section. If you have more questions, please do continue to we call it spam the Q&A section, right? If not, right, you can continue to post those questions, or you can post your public questions to here at public.cloud@veeam.com, right? To ask about question pertaining to Veeam backup for AWS, or if you are running on Azure or GCP, you can also send your questions over to public.cloud@veeam.com. If not, thank you for your attendance and thank you for your participation, right? Thank you for all the questions. I hope I never leave anyone behind, right? I hope I covered the question sufficiently. And thank you once again. Take care and stay safe.